I never meant for it to happen. I never planned to fall for her, and I definitely never planned to take what wasn't mine. But the first time our eyes met, something inside me shifted, something I couldn't fight no matter how hard I tried. She was supposed to be my brother's dream girl, the one he talked about with a glow in his eyes, the one he swore was perfect for him. And yet, when she laughed at something I said, when her smile lingered a little too long, I felt my heart betray him. I told myself it was harmless. Just chemistry, just a crush that would fade. But every glance carried weight, every accidental touch sent fire through me, and every word she spoke made me want her more. I hated myself for it. I loved my brother, but I couldn't stop wanting her. And the worst part was, she wanted me too. I never believed a single moment could change everything until I saw her. My brother had been talking about her for weeks, filling the house with her name, describing her as if she were the only girl in the world. He said her laugh was the kind that stuck in your head, that her eyes held entire galaxies, that she was different from anyone else. I listened, half amused and half annoyed, because that was how he always spoke when he was infatuated. I thought it was just another crush, something that would fade like all the others. But the first time he introduced me to her, I understood why his voice trembled when he spoke about her. She was more than beautiful, she was magnetic, the kind of person who made you feel like the air belonged to her when she walked into the room. Her presence wasn't just noticed, it was felt. I remember the exact moment. She walked in wearing a simple shirt and jeans, her hair falling loosely like she hadn't even tried, but it didn't matter because she didn't have to. Her smile reached her eyes as she greeted me, and for the briefest second, I forgot my brother was standing there. I felt something hit me deep inside, a pull I couldn't explain, like gravity shifting in her direction. I told myself it was wrong, that it was nothing, but the way her hand felt in mine when we shook made me want to hold on a little longer. I let go too quickly, out of guilt, but the sensation stayed long after at dinner. My brother did most of the talking, trying too hard to impress her with his jokes and stories, but she kept looking at me. Not in an obvious way, but enough that I noticed. When I laughed at something small, her gaze lingered on me. When I spoke, even briefly, she leaned in as if my words mattered. I tried to avoid it, tried to remind myself that she was his. But every time our eyes met across the table, my chest tightened. It was more than attraction. It felt like recognition, as if she saw through me in a way no one else had before. I spent the rest of that evening battling myself. Each time I caught her smile directed at me, I looked away. Each time she asked me a question, I kept my answer short. My brother was glowing beside her, unaware of the storm building inside me. I hated myself for noticing her so much, for feeling my pulse race every time she laughed at something I said. I told myself it was just because she was new, because anyone would be struck by someone so captivating. But deep down, I knew I was lying. Later that night, when I closed my bedroom door, I leaned against it with my heart still racing. Her voice echoed in my ears. I could still smell the faint sweetness of her perfume. It was maddening. I buried my face in my hands, whispering to myself that this was dangerous, that I couldn't let myself go there. She was my brother's dream girl, the person he was already building castles within his head. And yet, all I could think about was how her eyes softened when she looked at me, how her laugh sounded brighter when it was my words that brought it out. I told myself it would pass. That I could push it down, bury it deep, and forget. But then my phone lit up with a notification. It was her. She had followed me on social media. My brother hadn't even mentioned it yet, but she had sought me out. My heart thudded painfully as I stared at the screen. It was innocent, harmless, just a click. But to me, it felt like the first step onto a path I knew I shouldn't walk. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every detail. The way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the way her hair fell into her face, the way she tilted her head when she listened to me. It was unbearable. I tried to picture my brother with her, tried to force myself to be happy for him, but every image filled me with jealousy I couldn't admit to anyone. I was ashamed, conflicted, and yet, underneath it all, a quiet, dangerous hope stirred. The days that followed didn't make it easier. She kept showing up, always at my brother's side, but somehow finding reasons to talk to me. Sometimes it was small, asking my opinion on something trivial, laughing at my sarcastic comments, but each time, it pulled me closer. My brother remained oblivious, lost in his own world where she belonged only to him. But I could see the cracks. The way she seemed more at ease when she was talking to me. The way her eyes lit up when I entered a room. The way her smile softened when she thought no one was watching. I hated myself for noticing. I hated myself even more for not wanting to stop. Every day I told myself I was wrong, that this would destroy everything, but every day I found myself craving her presence more. She was supposed to be his dream, but in some cruel twist, she was becoming my reality. And though I tried to fight it, part of me already knew, this was only the beginning of a story I was powerless to resist. The days after that first dinner stretched out like a test I couldn't escape. My brother was happier than I had seen him in years. He walked around with this permanent lightness, like he was carrying something precious in his heart. Every time he talked about her, his voice softened, and I hated myself for the way I felt listening to it. I wanted to be happy for him, I really did, but each mention of her name tightened something in my chest. She wasn't mine to think about, and yet, she was the only thing on my mind. I told myself I could handle it, that I would simply avoid being around them together. But that was impossible because somehow she always seemed to draw closer to me. It wasn't deliberate, at least not at first. She would ask me questions that had nothing to do with my brother, things about what I liked, what I wanted to do in the future, things I didn't expect her to care about. She listened with a focus that made me feel stripped bare, like every word mattered, like she wanted to know me beyond the surface. My brother would laugh and brush it off, sometimes even interrupt me with his own stories, but her eyes would stay on mine, pulling me in deeper. One afternoon, she came by to spend time with him. I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying not to pay attention. He left the room for a moment to take a call, and suddenly it was just her and me. She leaned toward me, smiling in this easy, natural way, and asked me what kind of music I liked. I gave a casual answer, but then she pressed further, asking for my favorite songs, my playlists, the ones that meant something to me. I hesitated, but I told her, and the way she nodded, the way her face softened, it felt like she understood me in a way few ever had. We talked for several minutes, and when my brother came back, she was still looking at me, still listening. He didn't notice. He never noticed. Moments like that kept happening. Little pockets of time where she would confide in me about things she hadn't told him. Once she mentioned how she sometimes felt like people only saw the surface of her, like no one really cared to know the deeper parts of who she was. I wanted to tell her I saw her, that I noticed everything, that she didn't have to explain herself to me because I already understood. But instead, I just nodded and listened, swallowing down words I couldn't say. It scared me, how natural it felt to connect with her. It wasn't forced, it wasn't wrong in the sense of being unwanted, it was effortless, magnetic, and that was the problem. At night, I would lie awake, replaying those moments. The way her laugh lingered when I teased her. The way she leaned just a little closer when she spoke to me. The way she remembered things I said, even the small, throwaway comments. It was different from anything I had known before, and I hated how much I craved it. I told myself I had to keep a distance, to draw a line, but every time I tried, she seemed to notice. She would catch my eye across a room, tilt her head, and ask why I was so quiet. She would look almost disappointed when I gave short answers, as if she was expecting me to be the one she could always count on to open up. The guilt never left me. It pressed down on me each time my brother's face lit up when she texted him, each time he told me about how much he liked her. He didn't see what was happening. He didn't see that while he was trying to win her over with big gestures and flashy words, she was quietly leaning into me. And I didn't have the strength to push her away. My heart betrayed me every time. There was one evening that made it harder than ever to deny what I was feeling. We were all watching a movie together, the three of us. My brother had dozed off on the chair, leaving me and her on the couch. I sat stiffly, trying not to move, but she shifted closer until her shoulder brushed against mine. My breath caught. It was the lightest touch, barely anything, but it sent a rush through me. I wanted to move away, but I couldn't. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word, but I could feel her warmth seeping into me, making it impossible to think of anything else. My brother was just a few feet away, and yet in that moment it felt like we were the only two people in the world. After that night, I knew something had shifted. I could feel it every time we were together. The silences between us weren't empty, they were heavy, charged, filled with things we weren't saying. I found myself memorizing the way she smiled, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way her eyes softened when they met mine. I told myself I was imagining it, that she couldn't possibly feel the same, but deep down I knew I wasn't wrong. Something was building between us, something that neither of us could deny forever. I didn't want to admit it, but I was falling for her, harder than I had ever fallen for anyone before. And the more I tried to bury it, the more it consumed me. My brother's dream girl was becoming the center of my world, and no matter how much I fought it, no matter how guilty I felt, I couldn't stop wanting her. I started to notice things I had been trying so hard to ignore. The way she leaned into me when we were talking, the way her eyes searched my face like she was trying to read every thought I kept buried, the way her laughter sounded different when it was because of me. It wasn't just in my head anymore. Not when she was giving me little pieces of herself that she didn't share with my brother. One night, after he had gone upstairs early, she stayed behind with me in the living room. We were sitting on opposite sides of the couch at first, but as the minutes passed, the distance closed without either of us mentioning it. She told me she had always felt misunderstood, that people assumed they knew her without ever asking who she really was. Her voice cracked slightly when she said it, and in that moment, I wanted nothing more than to take away every piece of loneliness she had ever felt. I told her quietly that I understood, that I saw her differently, and the way her eyes glistened in the dim light told me she believed me. She began to share things with me that she had never told my brother. Her fears, her insecurities, the nights she stayed awake wondering if she would ever be loved for who she truly was. I listened, and with every word, I fell deeper. I wanted to stop myself, to remind myself that she wasn't mine, but it felt impossible. Every confession from her was like a thread weaving us closer, pulling us into something I couldn't untangle. She leaned her head back, staring at the ceiling, and whispered that sometimes she felt invisible. I wanted to scream that she wasn't invisible to me, that she was the only thing I saw anymore. But all I said was, "You're not invisible," and she looked at me with this expression that nearly shattered me. There was a moment that night when silence stretched between us, thick and charged, and I swear the air itself felt different. She turned her head slowly toward me, and for a heartbeat I thought she was going to close the distance between us. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and my whole body leaned toward her without meaning to. But then she blinked, looked away, and the moment passed. My heart was left pounding, my body aching with the weight of everything I wasn't allowed to say. When she finally stood to leave, she brushed her hand against mine. It was quick, fleeting, but it lingered long after the door closed behind her. The more time we spent together, the harder it became to pretend. My brother was blind to it, wrapped up in his own hopes and dreams of winning her over, but I could see it in the way she turned to me for answers instead of him. She remembered my favorite songs and brought them up in casual conversation. She asked about my childhood, about the things that scared me, about the dreams I'd never told anyone. And I answered, even when I shouldn't have, because the way she listened made me feel like maybe I mattered in a way I never had before. One evening, she and I ended up walking home together after being out with a group of friends. My brother had left early, and it was just the two of us under the glow of the streetlights. The air was cool, and our hands brushed more than once as we walked. Each time, I pulled away too quickly, my pulse racing, but she didn't seem bothered. In fact, she smiled softly, like she knew exactly what she was doing to me. We talked about nothing and everything, about the stars above us, about books we'd read, about moments in life that had left scars we didn't like to show. At one point, she stopped walking, looked at me, and said in a quiet voice, "I don't feel like I have to pretend with you." That single sentence nearly broke me. I wanted to take her hand right then, to tell her that I felt the same, but instead I just nodded, afraid of crossing a line I couldn't uncross. That night, I lay awake replaying every second of that walk. The way her voice had softened, the way her eyes had lingered on me in the glow of the streetlights, the way her words felt like a confession even though they weren't. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into it, but deep down I knew I wasn't. The bond between us was real, undeniable, and growing stronger with every passing day. It scared me, how much I wanted her, how much I needed her. And it scared me even more that I was starting to believe she might feel the same. The turning point came late one evening when we were alone again. My brother had stepped out to grab something from the store, and we sat in the kitchen, sipping tea. It was quiet, almost too quiet, until she looked at me and asked, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Like you're stuck in a role you didn't choose?" The question caught me off guard, but it was so raw, so honest, that I couldn't help but answer truthfully. I told her yes, that sometimes I felt like I was pretending for everyone else, but inside I was screaming for something more. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the reflection of my own longing. The silence stretched again, heavy and dangerous, and for a second, I thought we were both going to break. But the sound of the front door opening snapped us out of it, and we pulled back, pretending like nothing had happened, but something had happened. Something we both felt, something we both knew but weren't ready to say aloud. From that moment on, it was impossible to deny it any longer. I couldn't pretend she was just my brother's dream girl. She was becoming my secret truth, the person I was starting to need more than I could admit, even to myself. I tried to convince myself that the tension between us was only in my imagination, that it was nothing more than wishful thinking brought on by loneliness and guilt. But each time I saw her, each time her eyes lingered a little too long on mine, it became harder to deny. The weight of it grew inside me like a storm, pressing against my chest until I could hardly breathe. I told myself to stay away, to give her space, to remind myself she wasn't mine. So I started avoiding her whenever I could, leaving rooms when she entered, answering her messages with short replies, keeping my distance in every way possible. But that only seemed to draw her closer. She noticed the change instantly. She wasn't oblivious, and she wasn't the type to let something go without asking why. One evening she cornered me when my brother wasn't around. Her voice was soft but steady when she asked, "Why are you pulling away from me?" I froze, my mind racing for an excuse that didn't sound like the truth. I shrugged, tried to smile, told her I was just busy. But her eyes narrowed, and I could tell she didn't believe me. "You're lying," she whispered, and in that moment I felt completely exposed. The walls I had tried so hard to build were crumbling, and the way she was looking at me made it impossible to keep pretending. I tried to leave the room, but she reached out and grabbed my wrist. The touch was light, hesitant, but it stopped me cold. I turned back to her, and for the first time I saw fear flicker across her face. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked, her voice cracking. The guilt hit me so hard I thought I might shatter. I shook my head quickly, my throat tight, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, the silence stretched between us, charged and suffocating, and in her eyes I saw something that terrified me even more than my guilt. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The truth poured out of me in a broken whisper. I told her I was pulling away because being near her was too much, that every time she smiled at me it felt like fire, that I hated myself for wanting her when I knew she was supposed to belong to my brother. Her lips parted slightly as if she was about to speak, but she didn't. She just stared at me with this raw, unguarded expression that made my heart race even faster. For a moment, I thought I had ruined everything, that she would recoil in disgust or anger, but instead she stepped closer. Her voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it when she said, "I feel it too." My chest tightened, my whole body went still, as if the world had stopped spinning. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but I already knew. The way she looked at me, the way she had been leaning into me for weeks, the way she had opened up to me in ways she never had with him, it wasn't my imagination. It was real. She was confessing it without hesitation, without fear. I told her she couldn't say that she didn't understand what it meant, what it would do to him, but the moment the words left my mouth, she shook her head. "I know exactly what it means," she said firmly. And then the silence swallowed us whole. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. She stepped even closer until I could feel her breath against my skin, until the air between us was electric and heavy. My eyes flicked to her lips, and that was the moment I lost the last bit of control I had been clinging to. When our mouths met, it wasn't soft or tentative, it was desperate. Weeks of longing, weeks of silence, weeks of pretending we didn't want each other all came crashing down in that single kiss. My hands trembled as I cupped her face, afraid this wasn't real, afraid I would wake up and find it was just a dream. But she kissed me back with the same hunger, her fingers gripping my shirt like she was afraid I might disappear. Every ounce of guilt, every warning in my head, every thought of my brother dissolved in that moment. All I could feel was her, all I could hear was the sound of our breath mingling, all I could taste was the truth I had been denying for too long. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested together, our breaths uneven. She whispered my name like it was something sacred, and the sound of it on her lips made me tremble. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on us, but neither of us moved away. Her hand slid down to lace with mine, and I held on, even though I knew I shouldn't. After that night, nothing was the same. I told myself it had been a mistake, that we had to forget it, but deep down I knew there was no going back. We had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Every time we were near each other, the memory of that kiss burned between us, making it harder to pretend. The guilt was still there, sharp and heavy, but so was the undeniable truth that I had never wanted anyone the way I wanted her. And now I knew she wanted me too. The kiss should have been the end, but instead it became the beginning of something neither of us could control. I told myself over and over that we had to stop, that it was dangerous, that it would ruin everything if we let it go any further. Yet every time I saw her, every time her eyes found mine, the promise I had made to myself fell apart. The memory of her lips lingered on me like a mark I couldn't erase. I tried to keep my distance in the days that followed, but she didn't let me. She would find excuses to talk to me when my brother wasn't around, small reasons to brush her hand against mine, moments that looked innocent from the outside but felt like fire inside my chest. I was trapped in a constant battle between guilt and desire, but desire always won. One night when my brother had gone out with friends, she came over, saying she just wanted company. I told myself to stay calm, to keep things light, to pretend nothing had happened between us. But the moment she walked into the house, I knew I was lying to myself again. She smiled at me in a way that made my knees weak, like she was letting me in on a secret no one else knew. We sat on the couch, close enough that I could feel her warmth, and at first we just talked. She asked about the books on the shelf, about the music I had been listening to lately, about the little pieces of me no one usually cared about. It was effortless, the way conversation flowed between us, like our souls had been waiting for this connection long before we ever met. The hours slipped by until the silence between us became louder than words. She shifted closer, her shoulder brushing against mine, and I knew what was coming before it happened. Her hand slid over mine, her fingers intertwining with mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. My chest tightened, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. When she leaned in and kissed me again, softer this time but just as certain, I let myself fall completely. There was no hesitation, no thought of consequences, just her, just me, just the truth we had been holding back for too long. That night we crossed into a place I had been terrified of but also desperate for. The secret became ours to carry, hidden behind closed doors but burning brightly in every stolen moment. We were careful, speaking in whispers when others were near, finding excuses to be alone, hiding our smiles when we looked at each other in front of him. It was dangerous, thrilling, and terrifying all at once. Every time she touched me, my heart screamed that this was wrong, but my body answered her with a hunger I couldn't resist. She made me feel alive in a way I never had before, like every nerve in me had been awakened, but along with the joy came the guilt, heavier each day. My brother still looked at her like she was his future, still told me stories of how he planned to make her fall for him. I listened in silence, my stomach twisting into knots, knowing she was already mine in ways he couldn't imagine. I hated myself for betraying him, but I couldn't stop. I tried, God knows I tried, but when she looked at me with those eyes full of need, every ounce of resolve crumbled. She would whisper my name like it was a prayer, like I was the only one who could quiet the storm inside her, and I believed her. We began to steal more time together, each meeting more dangerous than the last. Sometimes it was just a few minutes alone in the kitchen while he was upstairs. Sometimes it was late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn, her voice soft and sleepy but still full of fire. And sometimes, when the world felt too heavy, we found ourselves tangled together in stolen embraces that left me breathless. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual. I had never been seen so clearly, never been wanted so deeply. And yet, the more I gave myself to her, the more I wondered how long we could keep this going before it all came crashing down. There were moments when I thought about ending it, about walking away for both our sakes. But then she would pull me close, whispering that she couldn't lose me, that she had never felt this way before. Her words wrapped around my heart like chains, making it impossible to leave. She wasn't just a secret lover, she was becoming my anchor, my reason for waking up in the morning. And though the guilt gnawed at me, the truth was undeniable. I loved her, and I couldn't let her go. Every kiss, every touch, every whisper of her voice pulled me deeper into the storm. We were balancing on a knife's edge, one misstep away from being caught, one breath away from shattering my brother's world. But in the quiet moments, when her hand was in mine and her head rested on my shoulder, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that she was here, with me, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The longer it went on, the harder it became to hide. At first it had been easy to steal moments in the shadows, to share glances that no one else could interpret, to live in a bubble where only the two of us existed. But as weeks turned into months, the cracks began to show. My brother wasn't stupid. He noticed things even if he didn't fully understand them. He would walk into the room and see us sitting too close on the couch, or catch the way her laughter came too quickly when I teased her, or notice how her eyes seemed to find me before they found him. At first, he brushed it off, maybe convincing himself it was just coincidence, maybe choosing not to think too much of it. But suspicion started creeping into his voice whenever he asked where we had been or why she seemed quieter when I wasn't around. I tried to act normal, to keep my face straight and my words casual, but the guilt was eating me alive. I found myself snapping at her sometimes, pushing her away when he was near, desperate to make sure he didn't see what was right in front of him. But she hated that. One night, when we were alone, she looked at me with tears brimming in her eyes and asked, "Are you ashamed of me?" The question cut straight through me. I shook my head, took her face in my hands, and told her I was never ashamed of her, that she was the best thing that had ever happened to me. But I also told her that I was terrified of what would happen when he finally saw the truth. Because it wasn't a matter of if anymore. It was when the tension grew heavier with every passing day. He started asking her questions about where she was and who she was with, but it wasn't casual curiosity anymore. It was laced with doubt. He started asking me too, throwing in little comments about how much time I spent with her, about how close we seemed. His words were sharp but coated with a smile, as if he was trying to laugh it off but couldn't quite hide the edge in his tone. I laughed along, pretended not to notice, but inside I was shaking. It felt like we were standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to give way beneath us. She refused to let fear control her. If anything, the pressure only made her cling tighter to me. She would squeeze my hand when he wasn't looking, brush her fingers across my arm when we passed in the hallway, find reasons to sit near me even if it raised his suspicions further. Her courage both thrilled me and terrified me. She didn't seem to care who noticed anymore, but I cared. I cared because I could see the storm building in his eyes every time he looked at us. I knew it was only a matter of time before he confronted me. The breaking point came on an evening that started out ordinary. We were all sitting together, trying to play a board game like nothing was wrong. She sat between us, but her body leaned slightly toward me, her laughter louder when it was my turn, her eyes softer when they landed on mine. I tried to focus on the game, but I could feel his stare burning into me. When the game ended, he excused himself to grab something from the kitchen, but he didn't come back right away. The silence stretched, and I could feel the weight of his absence pressing down on me. She reached over and touched my knee gently, a tiny gesture meant to comfort, but the timing was a mistake. He walked back in at that exact moment, his eyes dropping to where her hand rested on me. The air froze. His face went pale, then darkened, his jaw tightening as he set down what he was carrying with a force that made the table shake. Neither of us spoke. She pulled her hand back quickly, but it was too late. The damage was done. He looked at me with eyes that no longer carried doubt but certainty, and the silence between us was louder than any accusation. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to lie, but no words came out. He just shook his head slowly, his face filled with disbelief and hurt, and walked away without saying another word. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the look in his eyes, the betrayal etched into his face, the way he didn't even yell or fight, just left. It would have been easier if he had screamed, if he had exploded, but his silence was worse. It was heavy, final, like he was already pulling away from me for good. She tried to comfort me, wrapping her arms around me, whispering that it would be okay, that love wasn't something we could choose, that sometimes the heart didn't care about rules or loyalty. But her words couldn't erase the ache in my chest. I loved her, but I was losing him. And for the first time I realized I couldn't have both. The silence didn't last long. The very next day, he came looking for me. I heard the door slam downstairs, heavy footsteps pounding up toward my room, and before I could even gather myself he was there, standing in the doorway with his face twisted in anger I had never seen from him before. His eyes burned into mine, and for a second I couldn't breathe. He didn't yell right away, he just stared at me, like he was trying to figure out how much of me was still his sibling and how much had already betrayed him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and sharp, like every word was a knife. "How long?" he asked. I tried to deny it, tried to stammer something about him misunderstanding, but the words fell apart on my tongue. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head, and said, "Don't insult me. I saw it. I've been seeing it for weeks." I wanted to tell him the truth, to spill everything and beg for his forgiveness, but nothing I could say would have made it better. He kept pacing the room, running his hands through his hair, muttering about how I had ruined everything, how I had taken the one thing he wanted more than anything in the world. My chest felt like it was caving in under the weight of his words, and all I could do was stand there, shaking, swallowing down the guilt that had been building inside me for so long. I told him quietly that I hadn't meant for it to happen, that I had tried to stop it, but he turned on me with eyes full of rage and pain. "But you didn't stop it," he snapped. "You let it happen. You chose her over me." Before I could answer, she walked into the room. Her timing felt both cruel and inevitable, as if the universe wanted everything to come crashing down in that single moment. His eyes snapped to her, and the silence that followed was unbearable. She looked between us, her face pale, her hands trembling, but she didn't back down. He demanded she tell him the truth, demanded she say out loud what we had both been hiding. Her lips parted, and for a second I thought she might lie, might protect him, might save us all from this explosion. But she didn't. She looked him in the eye and said, steady and clear, "I love her." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. His face crumpled, disbelief and heartbreak mixing together until he looked like a stranger to me. He laughed again, but this time it was broken, jagged, like he was choking on it. "Of course you do," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Of course you'd choose her." Then he turned to me, his eyes red and wet. "You knew how I felt. You knew she was the only thing I wanted. And you took her anyway." Tears burned in my eyes as I tried to explain, tried to tell him that I hadn't planned any of it, that it wasn't about taking, it was about something real that neither of us could deny. But he didn't want to hear it. He shouted over me, his voice raw with pain, telling me I was selfish, that I had betrayed the one person who would have given me everything. I wanted to scream back, to defend myself, but all I could feel was shame. Every word he threw at me landed with the weight of truth, because deep down I knew I had betrayed him, even if love had forced my hand. She stepped closer to me then, slipping her hand into mine, her grip strong and unyielding. That single gesture, so small but so bold, seemed to break him completely. He saw it, saw the choice she had made, and his face hardened into something I barely recognized. "You can have each other," he spat, his voice shaking. "But don't expect me to forgive you. Don't expect me to ever look at you the same again." Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook, leaving me standing there with my heart in pieces. The silence after he left was deafening. I sank to the floor, my body shaking, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me all at once. She knelt beside me, wrapping her arms around me, whispering that it was okay, that love was never meant to be easy, that we would survive this together. But I couldn't stop crying. I had lost him. The bond that had tied us since childhood had been severed in a single night, and no matter how much I loved her, the guilt was a shadow I couldn't escape. Still, when I looked at her, when I saw the fierce determination in her eyes, I knew I couldn't let her go. She was mine, and I was hers, even if the cost of that love was higher than I ever imagined. We sat there on the floor, holding each other, listening to the echoes of his anger still lingering in the house, and I realized that we had passed the point of no return. There was no going back to who we had been before. All we could do was move forward into the storm we had created, hand in hand, hoping that somehow the love we had found in the ruins would be enough to carry us through. The house felt different after that night, like the walls themselves carried his silence, heavy and suffocating. He avoided me completely, moving around like I didn't exist, his footsteps echoing down the hall but never stopping by my door, his voice absent at the dinner table, his eyes refusing to meet mine. For weeks, it was like living with a ghost, except this ghost was angry and alive, and every time I saw him, guilt burned deeper into my chest. I tried to speak to him, tried to corner him and explain, but he would brush past me, his face cold and unreadable, his jaw tight as if holding back all the words he refused to let out. He didn't yell anymore, he didn't need to. His silence was worse. It told me everything I needed to know, that I had lost him, maybe forever. She stayed by my side, but I could see the cracks in her too. She tried to be strong, tried to hold my hand when he walked past us, tried to smile even when the air between us was tense and heavy. But at night, when it was just the two of us, I could feel her sadness. She would curl into me and whisper that she hated what this was doing to me, that she didn't want to come between us, that she wished love didn't have to hurt so much. I would hold her tighter and tell her she was worth it, that even if the world fell apart, I would choose her again. But inside, I couldn't stop wondering if I had destroyed too much to ever rebuild. Time passed, and the wound between us and him never healed. There were days when I caught him staring at me, his eyes filled with something between anger and heartbreak, and I wanted so badly to run to him, to remind him that I was still his sibling, still the person who had grown up by his side. But then I would remember the betrayal, the moment he saw her hand in mine, and the words would die in my throat. Sometimes, I wondered if he hated me or if hating me was the only way he knew how to survive. The love between her and me grew stronger in the shadows of all that pain. We didn't hide anymore. We couldn't. The truth was out, and pretending would have been pointless. We walked together, spoke openly, even laughed when we could, but every joy was laced with guilt, every kiss haunted by the memory of his face that night. She told me over and over that we couldn't live in regret, that our love was pure even if the way it began was complicated, but part of me couldn't let go of the weight. Loving her made me happy, but it also reminded me of what I had lost. Eventually, he made his choice. One evening, he came into the living room where we were sitting together, his face calm but hard. He didn't shout or cry. He simply said he was leaving, that he couldn't live in the same space with us anymore, that he needed distance if he was ever going to find peace. His voice didn't tremble, but I could see the pain in his eyes, the finality in his words. I wanted to beg him not to go, to promise I would fix it somehow, but deep down I knew there was no fixing this. So I just stood there, tears streaming down my face, while he walked out the door, carrying his bags and leaving a hole behind him that nothing could fill. After he left, the silence in the house was unbearable. It wasn't angry anymore, it was empty. Every corner reminded me of him, every memory came rushing back, and the guilt hit harder than ever. She stayed close to me, holding me through the worst nights, whispering that he would come back someday, that time healed even the deepest wounds. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But part of me feared she was wrong, that I had lost him forever. Still, through all the pain, through all the broken pieces, I had her. And she wasn't just my secret anymore, she was my truth, my partner, my love. She looked at me like I was worth fighting for, worth losing everything for, and I clung to that with everything I had. Because love doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. It doesn't care about rules or boundaries. It just happens, wild and unstoppable, even when it leaves destruction in its path. Years later, I would still think about him, still wonder if he had forgiven me in his heart even if we never spoke again. But when I looked at her, when I heard her laugh, when she whispered my name in the quiet of the night, I knew one thing with certainty: I had chosen love, and though it cost me more than I ever imagined, it was the one choice I could never regret.